Hello, welcome to First Chapter Fridays. I'm Jaimee, an assistant here at the Lewis County Public Library, and today I will be reading Allie Carter's Heist Society. This is a wonderful book for teenagers, young adults, adults. If you like the Ocean's 11, Ocean's 8, imagine that kind of breaking in, stealing things for a good cause mentality, but with teenagers. So I really love all of Allie's books and think she's just a phenomenal author who takes real life situations and makes them teen accessible and things that teenagers would never get to experience, but she gives them a realistic view of what that would be like. So here we go, the first chapter of Heist Society by Allie Carter. No one knew for certain when the trouble started at Colgan School. Some members of its alumni association blamed the decision to admit girls. Others cited the newfangled liberal ideals and a general decline in respect for elders worldwide. But no matter the theory, no one could deny that, recently, life at the Colgan School was different. Oh, its manicured grounds were still perfectly manicured. 3/4 of the senior class were already well on their way to being early accepted into Ivy League. Photos of presidents and senators and CEOs still lined the dark paneled hallway outside the headmaster's office. But in the old days, no one would have ever declined admission to Colgan on the day before classes started, forcing the administration to scramble to fill the slot. Historically, any vacancy would have been met with a waiting list a mile long. But this year, for some reason, there was only one applicant eager to enroll at that late date. Most of all, there had been a time when honor meant something at the Colgan School, when school property was respected, when the faculty was revered, when the headmaster's mint condition 1958 Porsche Speeder would never have been placed on top of the fountain in the quad with water shooting out of its headlights on an unusually warm evening in November. There had been a time when the girl responsible, the very one who had lucked into that last-minute vacancy only a few months before, would have had the decency to admit what she'd done and quietly taken her leave of the school. But unfortunately, that era, much like the headmaster's car, was finished. 2 days after Porschegate, as the students had taken to calling it, the girl in question had the nerve to sit in the hallway of the administration building beneath the black and white stare of 3 senators, 2 presidents, and a Supreme Court justice, with her head held high as if she'd done nothing wrong. More students than usual filed down the corridor that day, going out of their way to steal a glance and whisper behind cupped hands, "That's her! She's the one I was telling you about! How do you think she did it?" Any other student might have flinched in that bright spotlight, but from the moment Katrina Bishop set foot on Colgan campus, she'd been something of an enigma. Some said she'd gained her last-minute spot because she was the daughter of an incredibly wealthy European businessman who'd made a generous donation. Some looked at her perfect posture and cool demeanor, rolled her first name across their tongues, and assumed that she was Russian royalty, one of the last of the Romanovs. Some called her a hero. Others called her a freak. Everyone had heard a different story, but no one knew the truth. That Kat had really grown up all over Europe, but she wasn't an heiress. That she did in fact have a Fabergé egg, but she wasn't a Romanov. Kat herself could have added 1,000 rumors to the mill, but she stayed quiet, knowing that the only thing no one would believe was the truth. "Katrina," the headmaster's secretary called, "the board will see you now." Katrina rose calmly, but as she stepped towards the open door 20 feet from the headmaster's office, she heard her shoes squeak. She felt her hands tingle. Every nerve in her body seemed to stand on end as she realized that somehow, in the last 3 months, she had become someone who wore squeaky shoes. That, whether she liked it or not, they were going to hear her coming. Kat was used to looking in a room and seeing all the angles, but she'd never seen a room quite like this before. Though the hallway outside was long and straight, this room was round. The dark woods surrounded her. Dim lights hung low from the ceiling. It felt to Kat almost like a cave, except for a tall, slim window where a narrow beam of light came pouring in. Suddenly, Kat found herself reaching out, wanting to run her hands to the rays. But then someone cleared his throat, and a pencil rolled across the desk, and Kat's shoes squeaked again, bringing her back to the moment. "You may sit down." The voice spoke from the back of the room, and at first Kat didn't know who'd spoken. Like the voice, the faces before her were unfamiliar. The 12 on her right were wrinkle-free, fresh students just like her, or as much like her as Colgan's student could be. 12 people on her left had hair a little thinner, makeup a little heavier. But regardless of age, all the members of Colgan's School Honor Board were wearing identical black robes and impassive expressions as they watched Kat walk to the center of the circular room. "Sit, Miss Bishop," Headmaster Franklin said from his place in the front row. He looked especially pale in his dark robe. His cheeks were too puffy, his hair too styled. He was the sort of man, Kat realized, who probably wished he were as fast and sporty as his car. And then, despite everything, Kat grinned a little, imagining the headmaster himself propped up in the middle of the quad, squirting water. As Kat took her seat, the senior boy beside the headmaster rose and announced, "The Colgan School Honor Board shall come to order." His voice echoed around the room. "All who wish to speak shall be heard. All who wish to follow the light shall see. All who wish to seek justice shall find the truth. Honor for one," the boy finished, and before Kat could really process what she heard, 24 voices chorused, "Honor for all." The boy sat and ruffled through the pages of an old leather-bound book until the headmaster prodded, "Jason." "Oh, yeah." Jason picked up the heavy book. "The Colgan School Honor Board will hear the case of Katrina Bishop, sophomore. The committee will hear her testimony that on the 10th of November, Miss Bishop did willfully, steal personal property." Jason chose his words carefully, while a girl in the second row stifled a laugh. "That by committing this act at 2 a.m., she was also in violation of the school curfew, and that Miss Bishop willfully destroyed school artifacts." Jason lowered the book and paused, a little more dramatically than necessary, Kat thought, before he added, "According to the Colgan Code of Honor, these charges are punishable by expulsion. Do you understand the charges as they have been read to you?" Kat took a moment to make sure the board really did want her to respond before she said, "I didn't do it." "These charges," Headmaster Franklin leaned forward, "the question, Miss Bishop, was whether you understood the charges." "I do." Kat felt her heartbeat change rhythm. "I just don't agree with them." The headmaster started, but a woman to his right touched his arm lightly. She smiled at Kat and said, "Headmaster, I seem to remember that in matters such as this, it's customary to take the student's full academic history into account. Perhaps we should begin with a review of Miss Bishop's record?" "Oh," the headmaster seemed to deflate a bit. "Well, that's quite right, Mrs. Connors, but since Miss Bishop has only been with us a few months, she has no record to speak of." "But surely this is not the first school the young woman has attended?" Miss Connors asked, and Kat bit back a nervous laugh. "Well, yes," the headmaster admitted grudgingly, "of course. And we tried to contact those schools, but there was a fire at the Trinity that destroyed the entire admissions office and most of their records. And then the Byrne Institute instituted a terrible computer crash last summer, so we've had a very difficult time finding things." The headmaster looked at Kat as if disasters must follow wherever she went. Miss Connors, on the other hand, looked impressed. "Those are two of the finest schools in Europe." "Yes, ma'am. My father, he does a lot of work there." "What do your parents do?" As Kat searched the second row for the girl who posed the question, she started to ask exactly why her parents' occupations mattered. But then she remembered that Colgan was the kind of place where who your parents were and what they did always seemed to matter. "My mother died when I was 6. A few people gave a slight sigh at this, but Headmaster Franklin pressed on. "And your father?" he asked, unwilling to let a conveniently deceased mother swing any sympathy votes Kat's way. "What does he do?" "Art," Kat said simply, carefully. "He does a lot of things, but he specializes in art." At this, the head of the Fine Arts Department perked up. "Collecting?" the man asked. Again, Kat had to fight back a smile. "More like distribution." "Interesting though this may be," Headmaster Franklin interrupted, "it does not pertain to the matter at hand." Kat could have sworn he'd stopped himself from saying, "To my convertible." No one responded. The only motion in the room was the dust that still danced in the narrow beam of falling light. Finally, Headmaster Franklin leaned forward and narrowed his eyes. Kat had seen lasers with less focus as the headmaster snapped, "Miss Bishop, where were you on the night of November the 10th? "In my room, studying." "On a Friday night? You were studying?" The headmaster glanced at his colleagues as if that were the most outrageous lie any Colgan student had ever dared utter. "Well, Colgan is an exceptionally difficult institution. I have to study." "And did you see anyone?" Jason asked. "No, Oh, but someone saw you, didn't they, Miss Bishop?" Headmaster Franklin's voice was cold and sharp. "We have cameras monitoring the grounds, or didn't you know?" he asked with a chuckle. But of course, Kat knew about the cameras. She suspected she knew more about every aspect of Colgan's security than the headmaster did, but she didn't think this was the appropriate time to say so. There were too many witnesses. Too much was at stake. And besides, the headmaster was already smiling triumphantly and dimming the lights with a remote control. Kat had to twist in her chair to see a section of the round wall sliding aside, revealing a large TV. "This young woman bears a striking resemblance to you, does she not, Miss Bishop?" As Kat watched the grainy black and white video, she recognized the quad, of course, but she had never seen the person who was running across it wearing a black hooded sweatshirt. "That's not me." "But the dormitory doors were only opened once that night at 12:27 a.m. using a student identification card." "This card!" Kat's stomach flipped as the single worst picture she had ever taken appeared on the screen. "This is your Colgan student ID, is it not, Miss Bishop?" "Yes, but—" "And this," Headmaster Franklin reached beneath his seat, "was found during the search of your belongings." The personal license plate, Colgan 1, seemed to glow as he held it above his head. It felt to Kat as though the air had left the dim room as a strange feeling swept over her. After all, accused she could handle. Wrongly accused was new territory. "Katrina?" Miss Connors asked, as if begging Kat to prove them wrong. "I know it seems like a lot of convincing evidence," Kat said, her mind working, gears spinning. "Maybe too much evidence? I mean, would I really use my own ID if I'd done it? So since there is evidence that you did it, that should prove you didn't do it?" Even Mrs. Connors sounded skeptical. "Well," Kat said, "I'm not stupid." The headmaster sighed. "Oh, well, how would you have done it?" He was mocking her, baiting her, yet Kat couldn't help but think the answer. There was a shortcut behind Warren Hall that was closer and darker and completely void of cameras. The doors wouldn't need to read an ID if you had enough bubblicious to cover the sensor on your way out. If you're going to pull a prank of that nature, you don't do it the night before a morning when the maintenance staff will awake long before the students. Headmaster Franklin smiled smugly, relishing her silence as if he were so smart. But Kat had already learned that the people at Colgan were frequently wrong. Like when her Italian teacher said that Kat's accent would have made her stand out on the streets of Rome, even though Kat had already passed as a Franciscan nun during a particularly difficult job at the Vatican City. She thought about how silly her history of art teacher sounded when she waxed poetic about seeing the Mona Lisa, when Kat knew for a fact that the Louvre's original had been replaced with a fake in 1862. Kat had learned quite a lot of things before enrolling at Colgan School, but the thing that she knew best was that this was the kind of place where she could never share them. "I don't know about Trinity or Byrne or any of those European schools, young lady, but at the Colgan School we follow the rules." The headmaster's fist banged the table. "We respect the property of others. We adhere to the honor code of this institution and the laws of this country." But Kat already knew about honor. She'd grown up with her own set of rules, and the first rule of Katrina Bishop's family was simple: don't get caught. "Katrina," Miss Connors said, "do you have anything to add that might explain this?" Kat could have said, "That's not me," or "There must be some kind of mistake." The great irony was that if this had been an ordinary con, she could have lied her way through it without a second thought. But the truth, that she wasn't good at. Her ID badge had been duplicated. The license plate had been planted in her room. Someone had dressed like her and made sure they were caught on camera. She'd been framed, and Kat didn't dare say what she was thinking, that whoever had done it, they were very, very good. Kat's bags were packed in 20 minutes. She might have lingered saying her goodbyes, but there were no goodbyes to say, and so, after 3 months at Colgan, Kat couldn't help but wonder if the day she'd gotten expelled from boarding school might become the proudest moment of her family's long and colorful past. She imagined everyone sitting around Uncle Eddie's kitchen table years from now, telling about the time little Katrina stole a whole other life and then walked away without a trace. Well, almost, Kat thought as she carried her bags past the once perfect lawn. Ruts still tracked to and from the mangled fountain in the center of the quad, a muddy reminder that would no doubt last until spring. She heard laughter coming from behind her and turned. A group of 8th grade boys were standing together, whispering until one bravely broke away from the pack. He started, then glanced back at his friend, summoning courage. We were wondering, how'd you do it? A stretch limo pulled up through the ornate gates and up to the curb. The trunk popped open. As the driver started for her bags, Kat looked at the boys and then back at Colgan one final time. That is an excellent question. The bells chimed, students hurried between classes across the quad, and as Kat crawled into the back seat of the limo, she couldn't help but feeling slightly sad, or as sad as anyone could feel about losing something that wasn't rightfully theirs to begin with. She leaned back and sighed. Well, I guess that's over. And it would have been, if another voice hadn't said, actually, it's just beginning. And that's the first chapter of Heist Society by Allie Carter. This is a wonderful trilogy of books that we have here at the library, and they're available for checkout at any time. Thank you for watching First Chapter Friday, and we're so glad that you were able to join us today. Please tune in next week for the next episode of the series. As always, like, comment, and share our videos, and you can follow our Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube page for more videos like this. We hope that you enjoy and have a great weekend. Thank you!